That's Nicole, Sam. Yeah. She was one of my clients. She hired me to do a bunch of stuff. So I don't think she wants to hear me talk again.
Hey everyone, we're going to start in about 1 minute, right on time, because this is a live webcast. So, yeah, just that's your 1 minute warning. Get your gossip out.
This isn't advancing. Maybe it's because they've got control of it. Is it ready to go? Yeah, but I don't know why this is. I think it's hoping it's because they've got control of it. Vincent, can I ask you a question? This isn't advancing because you have a control of this first slide. Is that correct? Okay. Yep.
All right, everyone. We ready to go? All right. My name is Leah Eustace, and I am chair-elect of the AFP Foundation for Philanthropy Canada, which is putting on this live, free webcast from AFP Congress. So a big welcome to all of you here in person. Looks like we have maybe 80 people in the room, and we hopefully have a whole lot of people online joining in. I'll be monitoring that discussion, the online discussion, throughout the next hour and a half. And I will be taking questions from the internet and asking those on the internet's behalf. So please feel free to throw questions this way and that. In fact, just to make that a little easier, because the AFP Congress Twitter stream is so active, I would be really grateful if people would also use, in addition to hashtag AFP Congress, use hashtag AFP phone for this session. That will help us see the questions coming in from outside. Thank you. So welcome everyone to this session. Does your phone weigh 500 pounds? I almost said 1,000 pounds. Maybe it sometimes does weigh 1,000 pounds. Tips, techniques, and strategies for speaking to donors. Brought to you on behalf of AFP Foundation, and also with large thanks to Mackenzie Investments as sponsor of our live webcast. So I actually know Sam quite well, but I promise to be nice. Sam has been in the fundraising field for over 20 years and has taken on many roles, both professional and on a volunteer basis. Her resume is quite extraordinary, and I promise not to read it verbatim. But she has experience in planned giving, in major gifts, capital campaigns, direct response, special events. You're a bit of a whiz with data in wearing one of your hats. You've done media relations, public relations, and since 2005, Sam worked with the Ottawa Mission, but more recently moved to the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa. She's also director of Griffin Fundraising and works with charities all over North America and maybe Australia. So please join me in welcoming Sam, and please be patient. She's got a bit of a cold, so she's sounding very deep and
Very 1-900.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't say that, she did. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Leah. Thank you, and I do appreciate your patience with my voice today. I tried everything to get it to be somewhat normal today. So we're going to talk a lot about phoning donors, and really look forward to sharing some of my personal experiences and some of the things I've learned over the last number of years. And we do encourage you to ask any questions you may have for obviously benefit of those on our webcast. We're going to ask you to be patient with me as I rephrase the question or repeat the question back to everyone. So today we're talking, is this how everybody feels on the phone? Nobody wants to pick up that phone and phone donors. How many people are phoning donors currently? Thrilled, absolutely thrilled. So hopefully what we can do is enhance the experience you're having with them, and those that are not phoning donors currently to get on the phone with them. You know, if we're not talking to our donors, I do ask, what are we doing? Because we really do need to be talking to our donors. And oh, by the way, another fundraiser is, or they will be. We really, I find in this day and age, we're getting back to basics in terms of fundraising. We're going back to those one-on-one relationships. How many people have databases over 5,000 people, right? How many people have databases over, 25,000 people, right? So I've got a client currently that's got 7 million records in their database. So we're talking, it's really hard to have that personal connection, but we really want to make sure you do. And when we look at these pictures, these are the people that I would assume people in this room are working with and really trying to make that connection with their donors. Are they in the healthcare field? Are they working with, our homeless? Are they working with animals, our vets? Are they really trying to make a difference from a food bank perspective? Or obviously the tragedy that's just happened in the last week in the Philippines? Are they making a connection with people at church? Are they trying to get people back playing sports? Are they educating people? And this is really, the secret. Here's the secret sauce if we're looking for it. And that's really that this is all about changing and saving lives. And I know it because I do it every single day, is I get wrapped up, and I'm sure you do too, in the proposal writing and the direct mail and all those things that take over our day. But the bottom line is, this is really what we're doing as fundraisers. We're making that connection. And I always thought about it as a fundraiser. I just never had the skill set to be a doctor or somebody that could actually help somebody, but I could be that connection. I could be that matchmaker. So we're so busy doing the urgent that we don't have time to do the important. Sadly, this was not me that said this. This was someone much wiser than me many years ago. But there's a lot of people that I talk to in boardrooms all across this country and in North America that say to me, I just don't have time. But you know what? These are the donors that really want you to make that time. They want you to be able to reach out to them. And they want you to connect with them and make that connection. As you may know, and many of us do know, that our second gift conversion rates and our donor attritions are at all-time lows. Donors are leaving us, and our second gift conversion across North America right now is about 40%. So those people that have made a gift to you and will never make a second gift. And you know what I say about that? Many, many years ago when I started in this field, it became very much that the first gift was the most expensive gift. And I turn the tail on that these days and I say, you know what? That second gift is the most expensive gift. And the reason I say that is because if somebody's giving you a first gift of $25 and they never give to you again, you're still mailing to them, you're still using your dollars to try and get them back. So these techniques we're going to talk about today, really engaging those donors to give that second gift and become a quote-unquote true donor. So these people are looking for you to reach out. And they're of all ages, all races, and when I look at this slide in particular, our young people, what are we doing to really inspire our young people to give? And are we connecting with them, or are we just, oh, that 9-year-old girl brought in $35 and that's lovely, but are we engaging with her? And this is where I have the most fun being at the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa. We really get to connect with those young people giving to young people. So when you look at that in your own sector and try and find those people that are giving to people like themselves. So these people that we just spoke about really want you to make this connection. And it's really, really crucial for us to remember that donors are not giving to us. They're giving through us, right? So when I very much, go to meet a donor and they're giving, the organization a check, or they're giving us, a large gift, that's not me as a fundraiser getting that gift. That's the organization getting that gift. And I find that's been a little bit lost. So we're looking at the need. We're showing that need to the donor. They're providing a gift. We're providing that, showing that impact and that changing and saving lives, the accountability and the vision piece, and then of course back to the need again. Professional fundraisers are the matchmakers, and it's all about the donor. People give to people. Tougher than ever. You know, we're looking at budget restraints. We're looking at fundraising profession has been under the attack, unfortunately. Challenging economic times have been really, really tough on a lot of organizations. Increased competition. You know, when I go in my own mailbox and I'm seeing 4 or 5 pieces coming from many people in this room, it's really hard to make those philanthropic decisions. So what's making us stand out? Pressures from our board. Nobody has a pressure from the board in this room? No? Good. Cost of fundraising debate. It's the whole apples to apples, oranges to oranges. The whole, are you counting the marketing person? I'm not counting the marketing person. Those are really important pieces for us to talk about as a sector. The negative impact of the charity scams is really, we've seen that happen in Winnipeg recently this past week. Those make donors very nervous, and donors, let's face it, are becoming more and more savvy. Donors, I think, sometimes think that this is what we think they are, right? They think that we're an ATM. Just keep going to them, putting the card in, sending the appeal, expecting the cash to come back. They probably feel like this sometimes, you know, that they're just a number. And the reality is we may look at this all day. Yes. For the live webcast people, there was a big cheer in the next room. But yeah, so we're really feeling like are we just a number? Are we just, one of those numbers that connect with us? We're not really having that opportunity to connect with them one-on-one like we should be. And one day I started to think, and I thought, when a donor phones a fundraiser, does that fundraiser return the phone call? Anybody in this room, and don't put up your hands, anybody in this room ever have a donor phone them and they don't phone them back? Take that as a subtle yes. And I'm going to tell you a story. I had a situation when I was at the Ottawa mission, and I had a donor call me and say, my husband just passed away, and I'm giving $10,000 to 10 different organizations. And I've already given $10,000 away to one particular organization, but I've got this other 9. You're one of the 9. I'm looking for a proposal. No problem. Set up the proposal. She sounded quite elderly on the phone. She had an interest. I listened to her interests. Her interest was in education, educating the homeless. So I put a proposal together. I asked if I could see her the next day. She said, great. I went to go meet her at her home, and she said to me, it's funny. I made all those phone calls yesterday, and 4 people still have not called me back. Wow. I'm thinking, that's crazy. So she asked to see me a couple of days later, and I went to go see her, and she explained to me that out of the other 9 charities she called, one fundraiser said to her, I can see you in 3 weeks. One fundraiser told her that they didn't know if that's what they wanted to do with the money in terms of what her wishes were. Those 4 fundraisers still hadn't called her back. And so I slid my proposal across the table, which I had already shared a little bit with her, and she then slid a check across the table for $90,000. So she was willing and wanting to work with somebody that wanted to work with her. So yes, this is about us reaching out to donors, but I do ask if there is that opportunity where a donor reaches out to you, we really have to seize those moments. We never know why they're calling. How many donors a week are you calling? Just in this room alone, can you give me an idea? Is everybody calling at least 5 donors a week? Yeah. Anybody calling over 20 donors a week? Excellent. Gold stars. Super. So basically, I'm asking too if you're just calling to thank them. So this isn't really about soliciting. This is about that stewardship piece. I've heard it all. Believe me, I've been in boardrooms talking to fundraisers for years now, and I've heard every possible reason why they don't call donors. They don't have the time. They're not supported by leadership to spend time calling donors. I'm scared to be yelled at or hung up on. Okay, I say. Donors don't want me to call. I don't know what to say. I don't want to bother them. I don't know where to start. Who do I call? My database has got 5, 10, 15, 20,000 donors in it. This is my favorite. I work in a cubicle, and I've got too many distractions, so I can't call donors. And I don't know what to do after I call the donor. We don't have time to just call and thank people all day. So this has really resonated with me as I kept hearing this over and over again, and really felt like I wanted to share some of the insights that I had over the years with people. The lovely Penelope Burke, who's here at this conference, wrote an amazing book. If you don't have it on your bookshelf, you should, and it should be dog-eared and highlighted because it's an incredible book. 94% of study donors say that charities that they support never or hardly ever call them up without asking for another gift. So my response to you is, can you imagine what it would be like if you did that, right? And donors, this is something fundraisers are doing more and more of. So do we need to call our donors? The short answer is yes. And from my perspective, certainly we're looking at fundraising plus stewardship equals relationships. But a lot of people say to me, that's super, Sam, but where do I start? How do I get started? So you can't manage what you don't measure, right? How many people here in the room are using analytics to make those calls? Interesting, okay. So basically, from my perspective, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to work with lots of people on is using their very own database to really prioritize who they're going to call. So, reaching out and saying, who's lapsing, who's new, what message do we have for new donors, what message do we have for lapsing donors, who's increased their gift, what's their cumulative giving, all these metrics. There was a time and a place where fundraising was very much about the art of fundraising. You could have a great personality and go out there and raise a lot of money and really have great, relationships with people. That's still the case, but I would argue that we certainly need that, getting a little bit excited over there, that we really need that metric piece as well. Because a lot of people say to me, I've got 5,000 donors, I don't even know where to start, who do I call? Like I've said before. So I really look at working in your metrics and your tracking in order to provide accountability. So when you're looking at and you're saying to your supervisor or your director of development, I've made X amount of calls, they want to know what the results of those calls are, right? So who's keeping track of that piece? And they're sharing that on a weekly basis or a monthly basis with their supervisors. So that's something that I always suggest people do. And what I love about that is that you can say how many touch points you've had throughout the year. So of course we know in the room, fundraising wisdom 101, it is more cost effective to keep a donor than to find a new one, right? And in this day and age, we're talking between $50 and $75 to find a brand new donor. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money when their first gift's $25 and then you mail to them forever. So I'm not expecting you to look at all the little tiny print here. My purpose of this particular slide is to really illustrate the analytics behind this phone theory that I've come up with, or this method, if you will. So we're looking at really seeing how your donors play out in terms of your donors that have just given to you, your donors that haven't given to you this year but gave to you last year, and those donors that are starting to slip away from you. You haven't given to you in 2 years. So you're seeing basically through the metrics, you're seeing who you should reach out to first. Who's about to lapse, once again, who your new donors are, and who's missing. Who have you had a contact with but they're not giving for whatever reason. So you see here that you're going to actually reach out to your donors, the $2.9 million donors, obviously, are your newest donors in your top 2%. So I guarantee you that if I was to run this for your organization, they would have that opportunity to be able to say, I know exactly who those donors are because you're going to know your top donors. But are you going to know, let's say, the 153 donors that are in your about to slip off that are providing a great amount of revenue to you? So those tend to, unfortunately, slip through the cracks. And we want to make sure to capture those donors. We want to make sure to really look at those donors, and those are the people we're going to call first. So when you run this kind of data and you see who hasn't given to you for the last 3 years, I really encourage you to make those phone calls first, and we're going to talk about the whole phone process. So anybody in the room have any idea what their donor attrition is? How many donors they're losing a year? Because I'll tell you, we have a number of people that will say to you very proudly, we brought in 5,000 new donors this year. And then the report is run, or they do their own analytics and they see they lost 8,000, right? So they're not even netting out the right amount of donors. They're not even netting out. So you're basically looking here at various numbers that we've had over the years of organizations that tend to basically not net out, or they're on the plus size. But it's really, really important to know how many donors you're losing a year. And these ones are your long-term donor value. Does everyone know what long-term donor value is in the room? No? So long-term donor value is basically when you take, let's go back to, let's pretend it's 2003. So it was 10 years ago. I was cuter and much slimmer. And we basically go back to that year and you think, okay, if we hadn't invested $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, whatever the number is, to acquire new donors, and we had that crystal ball to look ahead 10 years and see how much those donors are valued. So for instance, if you acquired 2,000 donors in 2003, and you could see their giving over the next 10 years, that's your long-term donor value. So what are each of those donors worth to you? And how are you going to move them through the cycle? How are you going to ensure that they move up that infamous donor pyramid, right? We want to make sure that we know that. So what's your donor value? Are you, is it $560? Is it, something a little bit lower? So you're looking at long-term donor value. You're also looking at your consecutive years of giving. So does everyone know in the room, if they were to pull a report right now, could you tell how many people have been giving to you for 10 years? Right? You're using Razor's Edge, you're using Income Manager, that kind of thing. This is a lovely way to call donors. It's a great first step in terms of calling a donor. Hi Mark, it's Samantha calling from the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa. I see that you've been giving to us for 10 years. I just had to call today, and thank you so much. Recognizing that loyalty with donors is so crucial. And it's just a really nice way, not to mention the fact that donors have been giving to you for 10 years is a perfect opportunity for you to have a starts of a planned giving conversation and planting that seed. So there's lots of different opportunities you can have with donors on the phone. And then, of course, the infamous second gift conversion. So if you were to take 10 people, 10 donors that sent you a letter today, sent you an appeal back, their check, etc., and you were to say you're going to lose 6 of them, you'd be devastated, right? But the reality is that's what's happening in North America right now, is 6 of those donors you'll never hear from again. So we really have to be more strategic about how we handle a new donor. And when we look at a new donor and we think, first of all, why did they give? And that's a lovely question to ask. It's a question I ask all the time. What inspired you to give the gift? And those are those opportunities to once again make the connection with a donor. And I welcome them to the organization. So those are opportunities for you to really have that connection with them and right off the top. Because I'll tell you, some people, they're never getting a call. They've been giving for 20 years. They've never received a thank you call. This is a way you're going to be able to stand out. Once again, not expecting you to read the tiny print. My reason for showing you this slide today is to really talk about that giving frequency through the recency of gift. So you're looking at when are people giving and how much are they giving and how many gifts are they giving. And when you look at this, it's a beautiful way to call out and say, we noticed you've given us 3 gifts this year. You know what would make it lovely for us from an organizational perspective? In order to save the organization some money, we have a wonderful monthly giving program. This would allow you to have one tax receipt a year and have that conversation with them. But you can only tell when you know the data, right? You can only tell when you have those metrics if you have that opportunity to have a donor that's been giving to you 3 or 4 times. So you want to be able to call them up and have these conversations with them. Once again, you'll see at the very top, this is gifts of $1 to $100. And how I say it to everybody is, these are calls I make on a Wednesday, right? These are calls that I wait a little bit later in the week to make. These calls, $100 to $500, the people that are about to drop off, these are people I'm going to call on a Tuesday. And these gifts of $500 or more, I don't take my coat off on a Monday morning without calling them, right? I want to reach out to them and really engage with them because these are quite substantial gifts. A segmentation report, when you're calling donors, you really want to know how everybody plays out. So what you're doing is, by doing a similar thing to this, and you can do this in your own organization, by doing a segmentation report, you're seeing the newest donors you have, those have given multiple gifts, and you're able to really identify. If you can see on the bottom portion of this, 2+ gifts of $500 is 61 gifts. Or 61 donors, I apologize. So 61 donors, you know exactly who to pick up and phone today. Because I know certainly for me, 10 years ago in this industry, my world changed. I had the opportunity to be able to see the metrics behind what we were doing. And I knew exactly who to call because there were days where I actually sat there and thought, okay, this is great, but who do I call? I want to call donors. Who's going to use my resources the best in terms of trying to re-engage and your reactivation of donors? So the steps to phoning, it really does take a cultural change. Really does, you have to really ensure that you have the support around you to make these calls. Provide training if required. That's something certainly a lot of people do. And you're obviously prioritizing through analytics and metrics. And it's okay to develop scripts. People say this to me all the time. I want to sound like I'm having this conversation with the donor, but I'm a bit nervous. And I encourage people all the time to work with a script. Really work with a script and have that opportunity to reach out to them in a way that feels comfortable for you. So basically, you're setting up your objectives of the call and really wanting to make sure you hit all the points we're going to talk about in a second. And is it okay to leave voicemails? I get that question all the time. Is it okay to leave a voicemail? Absolutely. And I consider that a touch point. So there's different thoughts on this in the industry. Certainly from my perspective, I would rather leave a voicemail than take the time to ensure I've called that donor back and sort of, kept them on my list. I always obviously leave a way for them to get back to me, but I think it's really important that those donors have an opportunity to hear their thank you. So I do record a message on the phone. Hi, it's Samantha calling from the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa. I just want to reach out to you today and welcome you. I noticed it's your first gift. I want to thank you so much, provide you with a little bit of information, and certainly welcome you to the club. And my number is, and leave your phone number. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to show you around. So those are those opportunities to really reach out to a donor, but not so intrusive. Many people are working through the day when we're able to make those calls. So it's really important that we do that. Some people have a different system. That's the system that's worked for me. A really important point on this slide. Yes, question at the back. Oh, for sure. Well, it depends on, so the question was, if the donor called back and said, yes, I want to have a tour. In my particular instance, I work at a Boys and Girls Club, so I've got them something fabulous to show. I've got 8 clubhouses and a big camp to show people. So typically, I wouldn't. If I was in an office environment, I wouldn't necessarily bring them there. This is really meant for somewhere you had physically show them where their money was changing and saving lives. Yeah. Another question at the back, yes? Oh, yes. So this lady just made a point that she works at an animal shelter, and certainly an opportunity to show people around for sure. And there's nothing like showing kittens and puppies off for sure. Yes. Oh yes, for sure. So I usually do a bit of I've done it in the past where, you know, if I've got a mailing coming out. So for instance, I have a mailing coming out this week. So what I'll do is set some time aside, you know, in an evening and basically make a couple of calls. Now, typically I don't call after 9 o'clock, and I don't call before 6. So I sort of have that 6 to 9 window where I'll do a bit of a phone-a-thon on my own and reach out to donors. So the question was, do we reach out to donors? Yes. I do call people at work, and it's been well received. I do sometimes get the gatekeeper, which is fine too. So the question once again was, am I calling people at work? And yes, I do. Yes. Yeah, I don't ask, typically, to be honest with you, I don't ask people for money over the phone. So I'm engaging them through them face-to-face meetings, or if they've responded to an appeal, that kind of thing. I'm not typically phoning, like I would never phone somebody and ask them for a gift over the phone. So that's a little bit, that's my own personal preference though. This method has worked for me better, and I know it's gonna sound really funny, but it's funny, the philosophy of I'm not asking them for money. Now I will tell you that if a donor says to me, you know what, I have you on the phone right now, I'll give you I'll grab my credit card. No, that's not the reason for my call. Well, no, I'd really like to. Okay. So the second time I accept. But really that's not the reason for my call. Yes. So the question was, if I'm getting an assistant or a gatekeeper, what kind of message am I leaving? I'm very frank with them. You'll find, or I certainly have found over my years, that the assistant is actually sometimes more aware of the giving than the person making the gift. So sometimes they're the ones that are monitoring that for them. So they're doing that piece. So I'm not shy to, and the gatekeeper can be your friend. Yes, Leah. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we have an internet question basically asking, if you don't have a physical location to show, what do you show? And I think that testimonial piece, or having an opportunity to connect them with a client, whether it be, this is where I really look at board members, because I did work for somewhere where we didn't have somewhere to show, and we would have opportunity to have a very intimate event at the board, one of the board members' homes. Those kinds of opportunities allow for that connection and allow for that one-on-one. And that's really when you're looking to your clients to see if they're willing to share their story as well. So that would be my recommendation. So basically, working with program staff is so important. So I can't say this enough, is that in my time at the Ottawa Mission, I worked with a gentleman by the name of Simon, and he was our program manager. And he was phenomenal at connecting me to what was going on. Because it's really important that we have our own stories as fundraisers, right? We don't want to rely on, rely on statistics or rely on someone else telling us. We want to be able to have our own stories. So he would often engage and let me come and speak to the clients at the homeless shelter and have that opportunity to really connect with donors, so I would have my own story. Because when you're telling someone else's story, that you've heard third hand, believe me, it shows, right? You want to have your own story. You want to say, I met Peter, and Peter was an alcoholic. He came into our program, he's turned his life around, and now Peter is, has a job, and he's re-engaged with his family, and you want to be able to have heard that from Peter so you can tell Peter's story to the donor. So I can't stress enough, and this is where I really see that connection between fundraisers and program staff is not as strong as, in my opinion, it should be. And that in my new position at the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa, Once again, the program director, Jarrett, is amazing about having those connections made. So really being able to share those stories. Oh, I went back, sorry. So steps to phoning, once again, scheduled times. These are work times, but as I said earlier, I do call people in the evenings. But I typically phone donors between 9:30 and 11:30 and 1 and 4:30. And I find those are optimum times. Now, once again, there are days where I will reach nobody. and I'm leaving voicemails, and there are days where I'm on one call with somebody for 20 minutes. So it really does range in terms of phoning donors. I really do suggest you limit your distractions. A number of years ago, I was absolutely blessed to be able to go hear a gentleman by the name of Gerald Panis speak. And I was with Mr. Panis for 5 days. There was only about 25 of us in California. And Mr. Panis gave us all a little sign, and it says, "Only knock if you have a major gift," which was really awesome because it really changed the way that I fundraised. Because, you know, for me, and I'm sure many of you, is you're in your office and someone comes and, you know, the gala people want to know what color the napkins are, and this person wants to know this, and this person wants to know that. But it really set the stage in terms of what your focus was and what your goals were for that day in order to speak to donors. So it's really, really important that you limit those distractions. And this next one is a lesson that I've learned so hard. Is read that file, read those notes, excuse me, before picking up the phone and phoning a donor. How strong are your donor notes from your predecessors? Nobody's getting to, there's some giggles, nobody's really getting too excited about what their predecessors have left them, right? So really important to look at those notes, and I would suggest, and this is how I look at the notes that I put into my database, especially when I was working at the mission, is that it's, you know, something that that's the legacy as fundraisers we can leave. Once again, Penelope Burke has a new book about how people are basically going from job to job to job and not staying in these positions. So it really is that legacy that you can leave the organization if you leave solid notes for your predecessors. So I really encourage you to do that. These don't have to be long, huge notes, but I encourage you to leave them for them. The other piece about that is that, you know, if you don't look at the notes, and my instance was a number of years ago, I was working at a humane society, and I called a donor and looked at their file, but I didn't look in the notes section, and this was a donor that was very upset with us. For those people that are using Razor's Edge, does anybody use Annotate? Okay, so Annotate, for those that are not familiar, and there may be something in other databases, but it's basically a function in your edit menu that allows you to put a little note that pops up. So you cannot miss this if you're opening up the file. So if you're, you know, typing in, okay, I'm gonna type in Al Sharon's name, and Al's name is gonna pop up, and let's say, you know, Al was really upset about something that happened at an event, you're gonna know that right away, as opposed to making a mistake. What I love about this too is junior staff or anybody in that organization that's going to type in that name is going to have this alert. We used to use this if someone, well, we still do, if someone passed away, or if, you know, let's say a husband passed away, or there was something in the family, if they had shared something in maybe a handwritten white mail note that they wrote. So it's really important to make sure, that you have that note or that ability to be able to see right off the top if there's something you should know. So I do encourage you to look at that. Leah. Oh, 2 questions. So the first question was about privacy. So are there any concerns about privacy in terms of phoning donors? In terms of the regulations, you can phone donors. That's not an issue. Obviously, you're not sharing these names with anybody. We've had board members say to me, oh, we could have, volunteers in to do it, and that's really that's not something I would do. But certainly from my perspective, in terms of phoning donors from a privacy perspective, I don't have an issue with that. Second question? Right. So the question is, other than the usual information, gift date and gift amount and all that, is there anything other that you can get? Now, certainly in Canada, and I'm sure we've got people coming in from the US today on our live webcasts, but in Canada, we have an opportunity. We don't have many opportunities to do that wealth screening like we do in the States, right? In the States, you can basically find out what kind of toothpaste they're using. So here, it's very, very limited. So, you know, it's really important that that you don't kind of cross that barrier. But there is, you can look at, you know, the neighborhood they're in, you can look at those, research those pieces. But certainly from that perspective, unless the donor's sharing something with you that you can then share back to them, there's really not much. So once again, step number 3 in terms of phoning donors, inputting brief notes into the donor database. I have a lovely friend in Ottawa who was writing basically War and Peace on every single donor that she spoke to. And she said, I can't believe it. How do you make, 50 calls a day? I'm only making 3. And then I'm like, well, what do you, and we sort of walked through the process. And she was literally writing like every single word the donor said. I'm like, no. You can use, very bullet points, and you can use language that gets the message across, but you don't have to be writing big, giant messages. It's really just the highlights. And then, of course, any follow-ups and then review the metrics. So one piece of advice I'll give you is never, ever, ever Google the word stool. Ever. Don't do it. I did it. Thank God I came up with this. But basically, first of all, you want to say thank you. We're going to go through these in more depth in a minute. But obviously, you want to say thank you. You want to show accountability for that gift that they've given you. You want to say, this is how your gift was used. This is why, we talked about a few minutes ago, we want to stick really close to the program staff because we want to know the metrics. How many kids went to camp this year? How many kids are being serviced in terms of physical education? How many patients have you had? How many dogs have gone through your animal shelter? Right? You want those metrics. You want to stay nice and close with your program staff to be able to show that accountability back to the donors. Then you want to demonstrate vision. So in terms of vision, you want to show vision for new money. So basically at the same time as you're showing that accountability piece, you want to also show new vision for how you would use more money. And then of course, and the one that I feel personally that most fundraisers are missing is listening to the donor. What they're doing is they're getting their spiel out, right? We've practiced our spiel, we want to get it out there, but you forget to listen to the donor. You forget to actually hear what they might have to say, and that is the sweet spot in fundraising. So that thank you piece, sometimes we do miss it. We're so excited about talking to the donor, we forget to actually say thank you. And we really want to try to make each and every call sound like the only one you're making that day. You know you've made too many calls when you start sounding a bit like a robot, right? We don't want that. We want to be able to sound like that's the call you're making that day. Once again, you can work with a script. Yes, Leah. Okay. Okay. Oh, heavens. Yes. Yes, it is. Hi, Bernie. So this is a friend of mine, Bernie. So Bernie's asking if you really want to advise your communications department. I think it's a really, really good point. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, we're still siloed, right? We're all working, I'm working on this piece and you're working on this piece. And then you get a call saying, so-and-so has just released a newsletter, and you're like, what? It's got nothing to do with what we're doing, and that's happened to me. So you really do want to stay close to your communications group. You want to make sure that those two are working really, really well together, your fundraising team and your communications group. And there's nothing wrong with working together on that piece, making sure that the key messages that the communications team want to get out are there as well. And that accountability piece we talked about. So how did we use your gift who did it help? And it's really important, and Leah and her team at GoodWorks are really great at this, about that storytelling, right? So you want to know, it's lovely to be able to say, for some people, they want to know that you served 450 kids. Other people want to know about the one, right? They want to know about Liz, who came and, had a great experience at camp. So it's really important to be able to show, who did it help? And did we change a life? Did we save a life? And in some organizations, you're doing both, right? In some organizations, you're just doing the one, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's really important. When I came back from training with Mr. Panis, this was something that he really, really stressed a lot. And I remember for the longest time on my cork board, I just had those words. Did we change a life? Did we save a life? And it really, really changed the way I fundraise. There was a question. Yes. 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 So, great question. So, a young lady at the back of the room is saying that, do I say, is this a good time for you? Because she's finding that people say, no, this is not a good time. You know what? Each and every call is just a little bit unique. I do ask that, and we're going to talk about in a second that not every call is going to be an amazing call, right? So please do not let me, temper you in any way to think that every call is going to be blissful after this session today. But certainly, it's a respectful thing to do. I do it, and yeah, some people say that, and some people say it's a good time, or can they call you, then I do actually, there are times where you really have to decide. The person's voice is going to tell you a lot. And, I often do say, is there a better time to call you back? But you have to remember that if you've said, I'm going to call you Friday afternoon, you actually have to call them back on Friday afternoon. So it's a double-edged sword. Yes? Excellent. Great. Yeah, great tip. Yes. So this gentleman's saying, right. So do you have a moment from the phone? So this gentleman's just sharing that that's one of his tips, which is great. I'm going to use that. I'm footnoting you. Yeah. Yes, Leah. That's good. Oh, hi, Scott. Very good point. Very good point. And so Scott's just indicating that, sometimes there's an organization where it may not be a women's shelter, it may not be an appropriate place to be leaving messages. So that's really, and it's an excellent point, it's really organizational specific. You have to look what's going on in your whole entire organization before making these decisions, for sure. And it's really crucial. If I was to ask all of you right now what your cost of fundraising was or is, do you know it? So this is a question I get. Is anyone else getting this question on the phone? So after I found specifically, and I want to say it was 3 years ago, and correct me for those in the room that might recall, CBC did a big expose on fundraising and really kind of blew the lid off of what they thought was a big travesty going on in the world in terms of the cost of fundraising. And I found after that conversation, I had never been asked that before, and certainly probably the year after that, or even 18 months after, I got the question a lot. What's your cost of fundraising? And I'm always the very first person to say it's very hard to judge apples to oranges. The challenge I had at the time is my biggest competitor, quote unquote, in terms of another homeless shelter, was saying that they had a 0% cost of fundraising, which I would say, well, that's interesting. I guess you've never used a stamp. So when someone is going out and using that type of language, and then you're being very frank with them and saying mine 17, 18, 20, whatever your percent is, it's, when people want to put their money somewhere where it's obviously used well. And I think, how many people in the room have heard the Dan Pallotta TED Talk? Okay, if there's anything you take away from this conference, and it's really to hear that TED Talk. So Dan Pallotta will change the way you think about even the work we do. Dan Pallotta did an amazing job at talking about, do we want to work with an organization that basically, you know, is keeping the lights on and keeping cost of fundraising down, but not, you know, basically using the vision and using your dollars the most to help the most people? Or are we looking at the organization that has, you know, a bucket because there's water coming through the roof, right? How have we managed our money? Maybe that organization has done a lovely job in terms of keeping their costs down, but their staff are working in not great conditions. I'm not doing it justice by any stretch, but I do encourage you to go and watch that TED Talk. And in terms of demonstrating vision, we really want to, you know, see what we would do with future gifts. You want to be able to be ready for these questions. And what are we doing that's innovative? How are we different? How are we unique? What are we doing that the other guys aren't doing? What partnerships? More and more donors are looking at how we are partnering. Are we partnering as organizations? A really good example of this, and one I'm so proud to be involved with for the last 7 years in Ottawa, 7 or 8 different organizations have gotten together to do a planned giving seminar. So it was keeping our costs down, engaging donors, bringing in guest speakers, and I got to tell you, there's not one donor that said this wasn't a good idea. Donors loved the fact that organizations were working together to keep their costs down. So those partnerships are so crucial and really important. Donors want to see that you're partnering and you're becoming innovative. You're using your resources and your bricks and mortar the best way you can. And what projects and programs are planned to help more people in the future? So it's lovely that, you know, you've helped 5,000 people over the last 10 years, but is there a need to help more people and you're not meeting it? Or is it that there's no more people to help? So it's really important to know that if you're meeting the need or excelling at the need. Is there another question, Leah? Okay, great. Okay, so Dan Pallotta is, oh, help me, Leah, P-A-L-L-E-T-A? O-T-T-A. Yeah, Dan Pallotta. Oh, you're great. So for those people that are listening on our live webcast, we've just tweeted Dan Pallotta's contact information. Second question from Leah. Interesting. So a short amount of time. So it depends obviously how they're being asked. But if somebody, for me, if I'm looking at a file and I see the donors given, let's say 3 gifts even over even a 3-month window, I'm trying to convert them into a monthly donor. So that's how I'm, you know, in my call, yes, I'm calling to thank them, but I'm also calling to see how we can, you know, move them up the pyramid. So it's not asking for more money, it's asking for a different way of giving. So in terms of that, I would say, you know, you're looking at 2 different versions. So if you have, I was really, really lucky to work in an organization where the mail came in and by noon I had the people that I need to call that place, particularly for my list, was over $500. So people in some cases didn't even think that we would have received the check yet, but yet I was calling to thank them. So, you know, those tend to be, if you're getting those multiple gifts, I would wonder where the appeals are coming from, and why they were giving so many gifts at a short period of time, but trying to transition them into a monthly donor. Yes? So the question is, if the major gifts officer is really busy, you've got some short-term staff in, they don't necessarily have the skills, would I have to make the call? My short answer is no, because I think in some ways you can make more damage, like do more damage than good. It would have to be somebody, for me, that really knew the organization. And so especially with a major donor. Now, somebody that is, you know, can have basically, you know, has been in the organization and kind of knows the elevator speech and can dig some information up, because it's always important too. There was questions I was asked, and I had been there 8 years. If I didn't know the answer, I would say I'd get back to them. I'd go find the answer for them. So there's nothing wrong with, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to your question, but I am happy to get back to you. And I think it's really important to note that I'm not speaking necessarily about all those big donors. I'm calling $50 donors too, right? Especially if there's a new donor. So those are those changes. It's just a matter of resources sometimes. But from my perspective, I would reach out and have the more junior staff welcome donors, right? They're brand new as well. So you can say to them, you know, I'm just calling, my name's Suzanne, and I'm just calling to say thank you very much, and we noticed you've given your first gift. Do you have any questions about our organization? And if you've got something to show, you're setting up some tours, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't certainly put them at a higher level where the donor's more savvy necessarily about your organization. Yeah, you try to have the one, like in my humble opinion, you try to have that one person calling the same donor, because that segmentation piece I showed earlier, we really want to try and attach just those people to that donor and not have multiple people. Yes? Yes, and let me know how that goes. A lot of people have these conversations about that they're going to have board members call, which is great. And there are some amazing board members. Please don't misunderstand my comment. But usually what happens in what I've seen, especially at that lower level, is they'll make a handful and they don't follow through with the full commitment. So I usually, because I've helped other people do this, where I'll give them a list and I'll say, okay, let's try these 10. Not overwhelm them with a list of 100 or something. Let's try these 10, see what your challenges and successes were. And you know what, there's nothing wrong. Like I said, I was at an organization for 8 years where, you know, I could have been there for another 18 and still not knowing everything, obviously. So you're gonna always have that opportunity. The key is, if they ask, you're gonna answer them. And that's where sometimes we lapse as fundraisers. We're not responding to the questions that are being asked. Any other questions? So are you listening? So once again, I indicated a little bit earlier that, you know, one of the really important things are we actually listening to our donors? Because we'll be so excited to get our spiel out that sometimes we're like, okay, thanks very much. You know, you've said everything you want to say, but this is once again where we have that sweet spot. This is where we get those little nuggets that make the relationship advance and allow you to be a better fundraiser. Because we do have that layered approach. There's a number of times where I've had a really great conversation with somebody and I'll write them a handwritten note after and just say, you know, really enjoyed our conversation today, and thanks so much for sharing, you know, the story about your son. You know, hope to be in touch, and I'll slip a business card in. So, you know, they're gonna say things. They may want to give you a gift. They may be thinking about something, but once again, they may not be intending on a future gift. And some people are really honest with you and just say, you know what, to be honest with you, my philanthropic interests have changed. But you always want to make sure, no matter what they've said to you, that you've left them in a good place in terms of your own organization. Is there a special area of interest? It goes back to the lady who gave me the $90,000. You know, was there a special area? I heard clearly for her, she was not interested at all, even though she was calling a homeless shelter. She was not interested at all in sheltering them or feeding them, but she really loved the education piece. You know, we're getting, for those that didn't have the opportunity to go to high school, that we were allowing them to have their high school diploma by going through this little one-room schoolhouse that we had. So by listening to her, I wasn't going to force something on her that wasn't, you know, appealing to her, obviously. Do they have any questions? Do they need to feel more important? This will come through very clearly when I called a donor once and said, oh, you know, thank you so much. And she went on to tell me that her friend had been invited to a donor appreciation event and she hadn't been included. So those are opportunities to try and engage with the donor. So of course I made sure through the attributes that she was going to be included in that mailing for the next year. So you really want to listen to those cues that they're giving you. Sometimes they will talk to you about, do you have a plan giving program? This doesn't happen a lot, to be frank, but the odd time it has happened in my time. They want to explore other giving opportunities. We had a gentleman 3 or 4 weeks ago call and said, I heard, my investment banker told me that you've got something called a charitable remainder trust. And I was like, yes, we do, actually. But those are pretty rare that they're coming to you with those opportunities, but it does happen. Their family history, and most important, their story. And whether it's at the Boys and Girls Club or when I was at the Humane Society or the Mission, I would often hear people tell their story. So, if I said to them, what inspired you to give to the Mission? I see you've been giving for 10 years. That's when you hear those stories like, my son was an alcoholic and he committed suicide, and every year we give a gift back to the Mission in memory of him. But nowhere has she ever noted that before, right? So those are those opportunities to make sure that you reach out to them in a special way, and that's definitely something going in the annotate if they're sharing those special moments with you. Yes. Okay. You know what? It's funny. I've actually thought that myself. I can't tell you every single donor I've talked to over the last 23 years, but I don't think that's ever been the case. Actually, there's been really kind of funny things that happen. Like, I remember calling a donor once and saying, do you know you've been giving for 17 years? Like, that's incredible. And she's like, you know what? We gave our first year, we moved to Ottawa, and then she just started this whole, it was a conversation opener, if you will. I can't say that, for sure no one's ever went, well, crap, I'm done with them. But certainly from my perspective, it was more engaging. They were thrilled to be noticed for their loyalty more than the other side of it. But it's I've thought of it, so it's funny you say that, yeah. Yes. Right. So, and you know what, I absolutely hear this question. So the question for our live webcast participants is that she's called a donor that gave through telemarketing. So she's calling to thank them, and they think she's being asked again. So, starting off with, I am not calling to ask you. I mean, I know you know this probably already, but I'm not calling to ask you for a gift. My call today is purely to thank you. Because you do, and I've had this too, where a couple don't have the same philanthropic interests, right? So somebody might really love, the Canadian Rugby Association, and somebody thinks that it's ridiculous that they're giving there, the other spouse. Or somebody might think, I'm really like giving to the Mission, and the other person says, why don't those people just get jobs, right? So it's really a delicate thing sometimes when you are making those calls, because sometimes you do get the other spouse. Well, stop calling here. Frida gave you the money already. And you're like, thanks, Fred. So it's one of those things where you have to really kind of, you're going to have those experiences. You have to remember, and I know this is going to sound very obvious, you're calling people's living rooms and kitchens, right? It's a place that they feel very safe, right? It's a place that they hang up on telemarketers every day. So when they see that it's you calling, sometimes they can get their back up. Bottom line is, people are pretty open about stuff. Yes, question? That the shelter, it's not like that? Sorry, what's not like that? They are willing to? Yes, excellent. It's puppies and kittens again. So the question or the comment was, when she's phoning people, they're most willing to talk, which is great. And they are very excited in the next room about that as well. So that's great. Leah, did you have a question? Well, I didn't even plan that, but here we are. with what do I say? So the question was, do you have any examples of what starts that conversation with donors? Give me 5 examples I'm going to share with you today, ones that have worked for me over the years. So there's really that emotional piece, and not to stereotype by any stretch, but from a woman's perspective, this tends to be the one that appeals to women, which is that emotional, what inspired you to give the gift. Women tend to relate to this one a little bit better, and that's kind of pulling at those heartstrings, if you will. So what inspired you? It's a nice open-ended question. They're feeling that's pretty nice. You say, that I've been inspired. So this is my go-to one, to be quite frank. And then also, what do I say in terms of engaging? So if you really you're looking to engage a donor, have you ever had an opportunity to tour our shelter, meet our the people we've helped, come to a donor stewardship event, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another piece, that's that engaging piece. And of course, we heard it this morning, it really is all about storytelling. May I tell you about? So, may I tell you about a gentleman by the name of Frank who, came to the Boys and Girls Club as an alumni and is now having an opportunity to send his children there through our subsidy program, through our Camp Smitty program. So it's may I tell you about, and that's where that program piece comes in. You really want to be engaged and know exactly what your programs are all about, to have those stories. This one, once again, not to be stereotypical, but this one tends to work with men, that educating piece. They tend to want to know, in my opinion, or in my experience anyway, they tend to want to know more the numbers than anybody. So in terms of how many people you've helped. So did you know that? Did you know that we had 400 kids go to Camp Smitty this year? Did you know that we helped X amount of animals be adopted, et cetera? So this tends to be a really great question as well. And then there's the infamous, and this tends to work for a bit more highbrow, and it's that exclusivity. So that I have some exciting news I want to share with you. I used this. I worked at the hospital a long time ago, and I used this one without even knowing it at the time. But we would basically, if something new and exciting was coming out, if we had a new piece of equipment or that we would call donors and share this with them. And it's really that making them feel very VIP, or in this case, VID, a very important donor, making them feel like they're getting that information before anybody else. So it's that, I just wanted to tell you about this really exciting technique. Especially at the hospital, that was a really great one to use. But I think it can apply to a number of different organizations. So I want to talk, how much time do I have left, Vincent? 20? So I want to talk a little bit about some examples. So there's a question, yes? Yeah. So the question is, do I have any tips or tricks about that donor actually calling you back? If that donor isn't calling you back, you're going to have to call the donor again. And I wouldn't leave and once again, people do different things. I leave a first voicemail. I wouldn't leave a second. So I would try, but I'm not leaving a voicemail every time. You sound a bit stalkish, But that's just once again, everyone's got a bit of a different technique. But for me, I leave the one and then another. And you better, for those instances, that I would, and I'm just guessing, but that would be a donor that you've maybe engaged with before, that you've got something bigger and better coming from them. That wouldn't be a welcome call or a $25 donor. Yeah. Yes, question. Yeah. Oh, lovely. Something's wrong. Yeah. So the question is, this young lady works for an Ottawa hospital, or not the Ottawa hospital, but a hospital foundation. And so the number comes up like exactly the same number as the hospital, which can concern family members. to be honest with you, I'd try and get that changed. That would be something that, actually, to be honest with you, I worked for another organization, and I phoned myself one day. I don't remember why, probably leaving myself a voicemail so I didn't forget something. And when I got home, I saw it come up as something very strange, and we actually ended up getting it changed because no wonder nobody was calling us back. Like, it was like a very bizarre, it was an acronym, but it looked very odd. So that's a difficult one, to be honest. I'd be nervous about that, because you don't want people to get, what? They're looking to make sure their family's safe, and they don't want to think they're doing something. So that's a little bit nerve-wracking to me. Like, I'm actually a little bit anxious about that for you. But yeah, I would try to look into that a bit. We'll connect later. I'll have to know what's happened there. Yes. Okay. So Leah's commenting that, lovely Leah, who's taking all our questions today, is just commenting that there's a lot of questions coming through and we're not going to get through them today. But she's saving them for me, which is lovely, and I'll be able to interact with you one-on-one later. Leah? Okay.
When do you admit defeat when the donor doesn't respond?
I'm a 3-time girl, so yeah, so thanks Leah for the reminder. So the question was, when do you admit defeat, the donor's not calling you back? I'm kind of a 3-attempt kind of girl. It hasn't happened after 3 attempts. A lot of the times too, we have to remember, and we're obviously all from all across Canada at this particular conference, and obviously people from the United States on our webcast today, but there are snowbirds, right? We do remember that. So I do kind of look at when people are giving their gift. So if people are typically giving in the spring and the summer, and I'm reaching out to them in February and they're not calling me back, then maybe this is a snowbird. So you kind of got to watch all those pieces as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about some donors, some examples that we've come across, and this is just to give you an idea of how I look at all the information that's given to me before I'm phoning people, and certainly jump in with your own experience as well. So this donor is Miss Ruth Smith. She's a lapsed donor since 2010. She's given $100 through direct mail for the past 4 years. For those 4 years prior. She always sends her gift in the fall, and there's no donor notes. Any first observations when you see this? Anybody? Yes? Pardon? Oh yes, check the obits. I like you. So yes, so sometimes our donors, sadly, they do pass away, so she might have passed away. Yes? Exactly, so she's responding to that direct mail channel, and she likes that, yes? She's probably moved, so we might want to do a dental, I was going to say dental hygiene. We don't want to do a dental hygiene. We want to do a hygiene, a data hygiene on her. God, can't believe I just said that. So yeah, we want to just check to see if she's moved. Maybe she's moved from her home into a retirement place. Anybody else see anything about this? So for me, it's the miss speaks volumes. So this might be a call that I would actually maybe pass on to our plan giving department and have them reach out and see if, because typically a miss will have no children and that kind of thing. So this might be a relationship we want our plan giving people to come up with. And that there's no donor notes. So we obviously haven't reached out to her, and now she's lapsing. Surprise, surprise. So we are going to be in my world, I would call her up and say, we haven't heard from you since 2010, and we just want to make sure that we're providing you with the information you need to make your philanthropic decisions. And sometimes they don't know what the word philanthropic means. But you want to make sure that you're connecting with the donor and having that opportunity to express to them that you've missed them as a donor. And I say that to people. I say, we've missed you as a donor. We noticed that you haven't given, and we just want to make sure that, if there's anything we can do on our end to re-engage you into our work, we'd like to do that. And the responses I get are from soup to nuts. It's, no, thank you, that's been great, thanks for calling. And I get on the other side is, I can't believe I haven't given you a gift since 2010. Let me do that with you today. So, you get the whole gamut. So really important. And to note that she always gives her gifts in the fall. So what's really important about this is as our lists grow and we're mailing to lots of people, this is somebody we may want to move to just that appeal in the fall and not any other appeals during the year, with the exception of our newsletter or some sort of communication. This is also a question that I would ask her. So, Ruth, I noticed that you, or Miss Smith, I noticed that you haven't given a gift, at any other time of year than the fall. Is it okay if I make that change in your data file? Like, would it be okay if I made that change so you're not, having those appeals all year long? Because I see that's your history, and we're happy to do that for you, and at the same time, ensure that you get our communications so you know that how we're using the funds that you've so generously donated. So you can have that conversation with them. This is Mr. and Mrs. Clark. They gave their first gift in July of this year. The gift was $500, and it came through white mail. Does everyone know what the term white mail refers to? So for those that don't, in my world anyway, and some other fundraisers, white mail is when they have found an envelope, found their checkbook, found a working pen and a stamp, and put them together themselves. They've written on the envelope your address, they've looked it up, they're not using a response device. These, to me, are gold. And I can't tell you the amount of time I hear about junior staff going, oh, by the way, this came in with a note and I just chucked it. So white mail to me is absolute gold. I like to write back to the donor in the way they wrote to me with their receipt and stuff. So that's a really important piece. There's lots of little nuggets, the way the handwriting is. It's very exciting for fundraisers to get white mail. But so this is really important, and their gift's really, really high for a first-time gift, $500. So you would have wanted to reach out to them, not on November the 18th. You would have wanted to reach out to them right away. But something to keep in mind in terms of these donors. Mr. Singh, lapsing since 2011. He's been a donor since 2002. And you see in the notes that he's a former patient. So a couple things to keep in mind here, that there is some connection to the organization, but he has lapsed. So you want to, talk to him about his experience and have those opportunities to reach out to him. And then there's Mrs. Jones, who's a monthly donor since 2007. The statistics for monthly donors are typically a female monthly donor sticks with you for 7 years, which is usually 2 credit cards. Our male donors are typically sticking with us 3 credit cards, anywhere sort of that 9-year range. So when we get a monthly donor, we want to keep them, right? Because they're so important to us. And so this, she called to cancel, no reason given. She was also giving an additional $25 a year through DM. So really an important donor, and we've lost her somehow. So that's a donor I would call up. Now, a lot of the times, too, it's really important, those people taking those phone calls from the donor to cancel, you want to make sure that they're scripted properly and to ask the questions. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, is there something that we can do to make your experience here a little bit better? And sometimes it's, I'm now on a pension and I've decided I've got to cut back my philanthropic giving, which is fine. So, you thank them obviously so much, and can we still keep you on the mailing list? But that point of contact when the donor's calling us, I find a lot of organizations haven't taken the time to talk to their junior staff about taking those cancellations, and they've just said, okay, no problem, and they take them off. And then nobody knows why, there's no notes. So these are just really important. As we're learning about, the way that donor behavior is, it's really important to capture those not only the quantitative, but the qualitative pieces as well. So this is an interesting one. This is a gentleman, he's an owner of a company, and the company has donated through a staff event for the last 2 years. Any suggestions of how somebody would call him up? Ready? So from my perspective, anyone that's giving from a corporate perspective, you want to get into that corporation. You want to see if there's an opportunity. If the gift is high enough, we have at the mission, we had a group that was giving us, I don't know, $10,000 worth of stuff every year for around Christmas time. And they were our neighbors, and so we like to treat them to muffins or give them something that would, go into the group and thank them as a whole. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the time, Bob's writing the check. They know it's for the hospital foundation, but they don't know why. They don't make that connection. So if you can go in to do some sort of thank you at lunchtime or share your story with the entire staff, what you're doing is you're growing your donor database. You're allowing them to have that connection with you as well. And it's not just because a lot of organizations, if you're giving at work, pretend you work for IBM or something, and everyone's asking you to give $20 or $50 here and there, and it feels like you're giving to a big giant pot. But if you can be a fundraiser in front of them is really, really important. So I will encourage you to, if you're doing this for the first time, to get some support. Leadership support is really, really important. Sharing successes and challenges. And what I mean by this is not 2-hour meetings. I mean maybe a 15-minute stand-up meeting on a Friday afternoon that says, what went well for you this week? What went well for you this week? What were some of your challenges? And really providing that support to yourself. If you're a one-man show, I think AFP provides us with such an incredible network, and find somebody that's like-minded organization and try to work with them. I got to tell you, there are days where I don't want to pick up the phone as much as I'm standing up here and saying how important it is. And I do one of two things. I either, reach out to somebody and see that they're doing it in terms of a colleague, or I can, when I was at the mission, I could look at the phone and pick it up, or I could look back at the 240 men that were going to stay there that night and say, you know what, I just didn't want to do that today. So my preference was always to pick up the phone. But really create that support system around you. And as I indicated earlier, not every call is going to be amazing, right? There are going to be calls that are not so great, but you got to jump back on the horse and know that those sweet spots and those nuggets are coming. And set yourself up for success. Make sure that you're, at a place where you can be very much, no distractions, and have your file up and feel, like you're in a good place to make the phone call. Book it in your calendar is a really good opportunity. I book it right into my calendar as if it's an appointment with a donor, and it becomes time that's just not even touchable to your colleagues. And set your own goals. If you're starting it for the first time and you're nervous, try doing 5 a week. Then maybe change it to 5 a day. And even if you were to start by putting a half an hour a week aside, it can make a difference. Excuse me. So basically my message today is how did the mouse eat the elephant? And it was one bite at a time. So when you look at your database and you look at how unsurmountable that is, you think about it, it's one phone call at a time. Go ahead. Sorry. Well, you know what? I'm very honest with people. And I'd say, can I just grab your last name? I just want to make sure that I know exactly why we're chatting today. We're so blessed to have so many donors. I just want to make sure that we're having the right conversation today. I have been caught off guard like you every week. So I get it. And people are pretty patient. I have been spoiled in other jobs where, excuse me, I apologize. I have been spoiled in other positions where somebody would actually pick up the phone and say, can I ask who's speaking? I'm getting told, it's Leah Eustace on the phone. I can type in her name and pull her file up. Not every organization is going to be that well-staffed and have that capability. But I certainly would say that would be, just being really honest with the donor. Yeah. Yes, question. Yeah. So what, okay. Yes. So the question that's coming in is a really good one. So how do I, sort of work with a donor that may be on the emotional side? This particular fundraiser is from a women's cancer center, and having that conversation. You know what, sometimes it's going to sound really funny, but sometimes I find donors have told me stuff that they wouldn't tell their family. And I'm giving a talk tomorrow, well, that's if I can still talk, about a gentleman that I worked with, and he was a goat farmer. And he was one of the most emotional donors I've ever worked with. And he taught me lots about fundraising. So in terms of tips on that, is I let them have their time. And sometimes we're very much that connection. Once again, as I said earlier, we have to remember as fundraisers, that they're giving through us, right? So, if their mother has passed or their sister has passed, sometimes that's what's going on, and we just happen to be, and this room is full of incredible fundraisers. I know many people in the room. I think, our personalities lend us to having those conversations, and although they may be a little bit difficult for you, they feel like you're a soft spot to land, so I would definitely embrace it. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. So the question is, we've got new donors and they haven't put their phone number on the response device. Do you feel comfortable looking up their phone numbers? Oh, yes, I do, my friend. Yeah. So Canada 411 is my friend, and that's a really great volunteer job too. If you ever have somebody that says, oh, I want to come in and work in the office with you for a few hours, some of those looking up those phone numbers can be a good gig for them, or an intern, those kinds of positions, junior positions. And you know what, to be honest with you, I don't recall anybody ever saying to me, I didn't give you my phone number, right? And if it's unlisted, obviously it's unlisted, and then make sure you mark it in the file that it's unlisted so someone else doesn't take their time searching it out, because that's happened to me too. Any other questions? Yes. And they're goiter. Yes, I've had that. Yeah. You know what? Everybody is so individual. So the question for those on the live webcast is, some people are super chatty and telling us all about the grandkids, and some people are giving you one-word answers. And once again, similar to the answer that I provided before, I just embrace what I get. And it's going to sound funny to you, but it does, is that even though someone might have been quick with you on the phone, I don't think it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to give you another gift, or, you know what I mean? It just, sometimes people feel uncomfortable. I find senior citizens too have been told, be careful of people calling you on the phone and that kind of thing. So, it's a balance. And one thing too, and I haven't actually physically said it, but just, honestly, to really keep it in perspective and know that, that the people are having, once again, you're in the living rooms and you're in their kitchens. So, they have that moment, and embrace whatever you get from them. Last question here, I think. Gentlemen, how many questions do I have left? Can I have any more questions, or okay, go ahead. So if are you a junior fundraiser or are you a senior fundraiser? Or are you in the middle? Okay. So the question was, where do I start? And I think if you're making these calls for the very first time, I tend to start with those people that are brand new. And I suggest people, if they're nervous about making calls, start off with new donors. Because one, it's going to make a huge impact. And two, they tend to be more gentle with you, as opposed to that you've given and you've stopped giving. So if it was me anyway, I would start off with calling brand new donors and welcoming them to the organization, and then track that and really say, like, okay, I've called these 15 donors. Here's 15 donors I haven't called, and really see if it's making a difference in your organization, and tweak it and see if that's the right message. And really, I really try to do nothing without the metrics behind it. I want to see how many calls are being made compared to if I wasn't, sort of doing that test, if you will. Hi. Thank you so much, everyone. My contact information is there, and I encourage you to reach out. I'm obviously here for the entire conference and welcome any questions offline as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think one of our online folks said it best right at the very end just now. She said, I'm listening in online, and I've already used some of these pointers for calls this afternoon. So I guess she was making calls while she was listening. So that's fantastic. I think there was so much there for all of us, whether new to fundraising or people who've been in it for 20 years. Good reminders, good tips. That was really fantastic. We had about 170 online sites log in, and I think we probably have 100 in the room. So
it's great.
Great turnout for this.
Great.
So thank you again, Mackenzie Investments, for allowing us to do this. We tried to do a couple of a year. And thank you, Sam. That was fantastic, and I'm glad your voice held out. I suspect you're going to be quite quiet for the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Just a couple of housekeeping items. From my perspective, the most important being not to forget that we're doing the professional headshots just today only, ending at 4:30, I believe. So now is your time to run up and get that done. Only $20. I don't know, but we use the same person for our headshots, and we paid over $200. So,
yes, but we're gorgeous.
Well, yeah, we look fantastic in our pictures. So $20 with all funds raised through that going to the AFP Foundation. There's my little kind of plug for the foundation. And Ask the Expert, also happening during the break. Tara, George, and Julie Wertenen from KCI talking about career planning. Opening reception at 5:30 tonight. And the delegate networking dinners are happening, leaving from the conference center at 6:30 p.m. So again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks.